Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're tearing down a story you probably think you already know inside and out, the miracle on the Hudson. But we're going to replace that flawless Hollywood fairy tale with a much more powerful, gritty reality. Because the true story of US Airways Flight 1549, it isn't just about a miracle. It is a fascinating, intense study of extreme physics, terrifying system flaws, and just unprecedented human competence under pressure. Okay, let's dive right into this. 208. That is the exact number of seconds this crew had to solve a mathematically impossible problem. Literally, from the moment of the bird strike to the very second they hit the water, 208 seconds ticked away. And every single one of those seconds has been analyzed, simulated, and debated for years. Section 1. 208 seconds to impact. The disappearing altitude. Let's set the scene here. It's January 15th, 2009. An Airbus A320 is climbing out of LaGuardia Airport at just under 2,900 feet. Suddenly, in an instant, a massive flock of birds fills the windshield, wiping out the thrust in both engines simultaneously. Just like that, you have a 70-ton glider silently descending over one of the most densely populated cities on planet Earth. And the pace of this timeline is just staggering. 0 seconds, the strike happens. Barely 15 seconds later, air traffic control responds. By 30 seconds, the infamous Mayday call is made. And at 208 seconds, impact. But here is a wild detail about the cockpit. First Officer Jeffrey Skiles had an impressive 15,000 hours of flight time in his career, but flight records show this was the very first time he had ever flown this exact aircraft type. That is the pressure cooker they were in.
So almost immediately, Skiles pulls out the emergency checklist for a dual engine failure, which outlines 3 critical steps: identify the failure, attempt a relight, and prepare for ditching. But there was a massive flaw in this design. See, this was a 3-page checklist written by engineers to be worked through calmly at cruising altitude, with thousands of feet and minutes to spare. Flight 1549 had neither the altitude nor the minutes.
Which brings us to Section 2, fighting the fly-by-wire when computers intervene. As the aircraft went down, turning back to LaGuardia or trying for nearby Teterboro Airport in New Jersey was immediately ruled out. An Airbus with dead engines doesn't fly, it glides, and turning burns altitude. The exact altitude Captain Chesley Sullenberger simply didn't have to spare. This left absolutely no alternative but the freezing, flat expanse of the Hudson River. And this brilliantly illustrates one of the most misunderstood moments of the flight. The A320 is a fly-by-wire aircraft. That means the pilot's movements don't physically move the flaps. They talk to a computer, which then moves the flaps. It's designed to prevent a pilot from overstressing the airframe in normal flight. But on a river, with seconds left, this system physically prevented Sullenberger from pulling the nose up as high as he needed to in those final critical moments. The computer was literally fighting his inputs. And because of that computer limitation, we've really got to dismantle this myth of a gentle, smooth water landing. The angle of attack was just too high, making the touchdown incredibly violent. The impact was so severe that the left engine was entirely ripped right off its mount. Below the waterline, the aft fuselage actually buckled and split open, and freezing Hudson River water instantly began pouring into the back of the passenger cabin.
Moving on to Section 3, the freezing reality of survival. Evacuation under extreme duress.
The situation in the back of that plane was absolute chaos. Upon impact, a structural support beam actually punched up through the cabin floor, deeply gashing the leg of flight attendant Doreen Welsh. Despite bleeding profusely and standing in rapidly rising water, she stayed right at her post, forcefully guiding passengers forward, away from the useless flooding rear exits. Now, what's really interesting about this data is that it completely shatters the illusion of a perfectly calm evacuation. Of the 150 passengers on board, only 77 thought to grab a floating seat cushion. And incredibly, only about 10 people successfully grabbed and wore a life vest on their way out. The sheer human panic just took over. Most people ran for the exits entirely empty-handed, leaving everything behind. And running out empty-handed? That was a truly terrifying prospect when you look at the environment outside. Imagine standing waist-deep in 41-degree water. Factor in the wind chill, and the air temperature was a bone-chilling 2 degrees Fahrenheit. Within 2 minutes, passengers standing on the slowly sinking wings were already submerged. Hypothermia was an immediate deadly threat. But here is where the true unsung heroes of the day stepped in. The local commuter ferry captains saw the plane go down and they didn't hesitate.
The very first ferry reached the aircraft in just 3 minutes. Within 10 minutes, 7 ferries surrounded the plane, soon joined by the FDNY and Coast Guard. Deckhands were throwing ropes to freezing passengers, pulling 87 people directly off the sinking wings and 64 from the inflatable rafts. Their swift response is exactly why 155 people didn't freeze to death that afternoon.
All right, Section 4, Investigating the Miracle, the 15-month Search for the Truth.
You know, a popular Hollywood film framed this investigation as this dramatic fight with villainous bureaucrats trying to frame the pilot. Actually, scratch that, it's just not reality. The actual NTSB hearing was a deeply rigorous technical pursuit of truth to ensure a crash like this never happens again. And the massive question that haunted the entire 15-month investigation was this: could Sullenberger have actually made it back to a runway at LaGuardia? At first, the initial data looked awful for him. When test pilots were put in a simulator and told to turn back the exact second the birds hit, they landed safely.
But there was a huge catch. That simulator run was entirely unrealistic. To account for human reality, the NTSB applied a crucial metric, the 35-second delay. This represents the real-world time it takes a human brain to recognize a massive failure, understand what it means, and actually commit to a plan. When they built those realistic 35 seconds of human reaction time into the simulator, every single attempt to return to the runway ended in catastrophic failure. The river was definitively the only option.
Now, you might naturally assume airplanes are tested for giant flocks of birds, right? Well, at the time, the FAA only required engines to survive ingesting a single 4-pound bird. The investigation exposed a massive flaw here. The Smithsonian analyzed DNA from the engine tissue and found these weren't small local park birds. These were massive, 8-pound migratory geese traveling all the way from Labrador. The engines ingested at least 2 of them each. That flock shattered the FAA certification rules by weight alone. The investigators also uncovered a pretty terrifying technological blind spot. The engines had absolutely no sensory capability to tell the cockpit computers that their internal components were physically destroyed. So for critical seconds, while the plane was quite literally falling out of the sky, First Officer Skiles was frantically working a checklist to restart engines that were essentially scrap metal, just wasting precious time. And the safety revelations actually didn't stop there. 2 passengers suffered severe shoulder fractures, but they got them from doing exactly what they were instructed to do. The standard brace position guidance had quietly fallen out of date. It was originally designed for older airplane seats that gave way upon impact. Against the newer, rigid seats of the A320, the perfect brace position actually caused the very injuries it was supposed to prevent.
This leads us right into Section 5, Preparation over Luck, the resume of a survivor.
So the crucial point is this: landing a massive airliner on a river without tearing it to pieces, that isn't a stroke of luck. It requires a highly specific set of skills. Just look at Captain Sullenberger's background. He was a trained glider pilot and instructor. He knew exactly how to fly an aircraft without engine thrust. He had served on accident investigation boards for the Air Force and the NTSB, meaning he had spent his life studying other people's worst days. He even ran his own aviation safety consulting firm. This wasn't luck. This was decades of quiet, meticulous rehearsal cashing in all at once on a random Thursday afternoon.
Which brings us to a quote that I think just perfectly summarizes the reality of Flight 1549. It was a man doing a job he prepared his whole career for, one decision at a time, in total silence where 2 engines used to be. The real story here isn't some magical fairy tale. It's a testament to extreme professional competence operating perfectly in the face of cascading technological and regulatory flaws.
Which leaves us with one final, kind of haunting thought. If the safety margins of aviation are only ever truly tested and rewritten in the wake of near disasters like this one, what untested assumptions are we flying with today? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer. If you want to see the other end of the aviation survival spectrum, make sure you hit subscribe and check out our next explainer covering the strongest single plane crash in history with Japan Airlines. It's an entirely different story, and it will for sure change exactly how you think about this one. See you next time.